Palestine is one of the most politically charged places in the world, but at its core it refers to a specific land and a people with a long history. Today, the State of Palestine claims the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. These areas are often called the Palestinian territories, or Occupied Palestinian Territory, because Israel has controlled key aspects of them since the 1967 war. The West Bank lies east of Israel and borders Jordan, while Gaza is a narrow coastal strip bordering Israel, Egypt, and the Mediterranean Sea. Together, these territories cover just over 6,000 square kilometers, yet they are home to more than 5 million Palestinians. Palestine's proclaimed capital is Jerusalem, though Ramallah functions as the main administrative center for the Palestinian Authority. This basic geography already reveals one of Palestine's central challenges. It is a state recognized by much of the world, but its territory is fragmented, its borders are unresolved, and its capital is disputed. The region known as Palestine sits at a crossroads between Africa, Asia, and the Mediterranean world. For thousands of years, armies, traders, pilgrims, and empires passed through or ruled this land. Ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian powers interacted with it, while later empires, including Roman, Byzantine, Islamic, Crusader, Ottoman, and British authorities, shaped its cities, population, and political identity. Its location made it strategically valuable, but its religious significance made it even more important. Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron, and other places in historic Palestine hold deep meaning for Muslims, Christians, and Jews. This layered history is why competing national, religious, and political narratives remain so powerful. Palestine is not simply a modern conflict zone, it is a place where ancient memory, imperial history, and modern nationalism overlap. Understanding that long background helps explain why arguments over sovereignty, holy sites, land ownership, and identity are so emotionally intense and internationally significant. The modern Israeli-Palestinian conflict is often traced to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when Zionism emerged as a movement seeking a Jewish homeland, and Palestinian Arab nationalism developed in response to local, regional, and imperial changes. During World War I, Britain supported Zionist aspirations through the Balfour Declaration while also making wartime promises to Arab leaders. After the Ottoman Empire collapsed, Britain took control of Palestine under a League of Nations mandate. Under British rule, Jewish immigration increased, especially as anti-Semitism and persecution intensified in Europe. Palestinian Arabs, who made up the majority population, feared dispossession and the loss of political control over their homeland. Tensions grew into repeated unrest and violence. By the 1940s, British authorities could no longer manage the competing demands. The question of Palestine was handed to the United Nations, which proposed partitioning the land into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem under international administration. The 1947 United Nations partition plan was accepted by Jewish leaders but rejected by Palestinian Arab leaders and surrounding Arab states, who argued that it unfairly allocated land and violated the rights of the Arab majority. Civil war broke out between Jewish and Palestinian Arab communities even before British withdrawal. In 1948, Israel declared independence, and neighboring Arab armies entered the war. By the end of the conflict, Israel controlled more territory than the UN partition plan had proposed. For Palestinians, the defining event of this period is the Nakba, meaning catastrophe. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced or fled during the war, and many were prevented from returning to their homes. Villages were destroyed or depopulated, and a large refugee population emerged in neighboring countries, Gaza, the West Bank, and beyond. The Nakba remains central to Palestinian identity because it represents not only military defeat, but dispossession, exile, and an unresolved demand for justice. After the 1948 war, Palestine did not become an independent Arab state. Instead, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, came under Jordanian control, while the Gaza Strip was administered by Egypt. Palestinians were divided across borders, refugee camps, and diaspora communities. Then, in the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel captured the West Bank from Jordan and Gaza from Egypt, along with East Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, and the Sinai Peninsula. This war created the occupation that still defines Palestinian political life today. Israel later annexed East Jerusalem, a move not widely recognized internationally, and began building settlements in occupied territory. For Palestinians, 1967 deepened the loss of land and self-rule. For Israel, control over these territories was framed by many leaders as a security issue and, for some, a historic or religious claim. The result was a prolonged military occupation, with Palestinians living under Israeli control while lacking full citizenship rights in the state controlling their movement, borders, and much of their land. The Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, became the main representative body of the Palestinian national movement. Founded in the 1960s, it sought Palestinian self-determination and was led for decades by Yasser Arafat. The PLO used diplomacy, armed struggle, and international advocacy to keep the Palestinian cause visible. In 1988, it declared the independence of the State of Palestine, signaling a shift toward accepting a state in the West Bank and Gaza rather than all of historic Palestine. This helped open the door to negotiations with Israel. In 1993, the Oslo Accords created mutual recognition between Israel and the PLO and established the Palestinian Authority, or PA, to govern parts of the West Bank and Gaza. Many hoped Oslo would lead to a final peace agreement. But the accords left the biggest issues unresolved: borders, Jerusalem, refugees, settlements, security, and full sovereignty. Over time, the peace process stalled, and temporary arrangements hardened into a new political reality. The Palestinian Authority was created as an interim government, not as a fully sovereign state. In parts of the West Bank, it manages civil affairs such as education, policing, and local administration, but Israel retains major control over borders, airspace, movement, security, and large portions of land. The West Bank itself is divided into zones established by the Oslo process, with different levels of Palestinian and Israeli control. This has produced a patchwork of Palestinian towns, Israeli military areas, settlements, checkpoints, and restricted roads. Ramallah became the de facto administrative center because Palestinian institutions operate there, even though Palestinians claim East Jerusalem as their capital. The PA is led by the Fatah movement, but it has faced criticism for limited democratic renewal, corruption, security coordination with Israel, and its inability to end occupation. For many Palestinians, the PA is both a necessary administrative structure and a symbol of a peace process that failed to deliver independence. Gaza has followed a different and devastating path. It is one of the most densely populated places on Earth, with a large refugee population descended from families displaced in 1948. Israel withdrew its settlers and permanent ground forces from Gaza in 2005, but continued to control many external aspects of life there, including most crossings, airspace, and maritime access, while Egypt controls Gaza's southern border crossing. In 2006, Hamas won Palestinian legislative elections, and in 2007, after violent internal conflict with Fatah, Hamas took control of Gaza. Since then, Palestinian politics has been split. The Fatah-led Palestinian Authority governs parts of the West Bank, while Hamas controls Gaza. Israel and Egypt imposed severe restrictions on Gaza, with Israel maintaining a blockade it says is for security reasons. Human rights organizations and many international legal experts describe the blockade as collective punishment. Over the years, repeated wars have damaged Gaza's infrastructure, economy, hospitals, schools, and basic living conditions. Israeli settlements are one of the most important obstacles to a future Palestinian state. Since 1967, Israel has built and expanded settlements in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. More than 737,000 Israeli settlers now live in these areas. Under international law, the transfer of an occupying power's civilian population into occupied territory is considered illegal, though Israel disputes some of the legal framing and often argues historical, religious, and security justifications. For Palestinians, settlements are not just housing projects, they reshape the map. They are connected by roads, protected by the Israeli military, and often built on or near land Palestinians view as necessary for a viable state. Settlement expansion fragments Palestinian communities and makes it harder to imagine a continuous, independent Palestine. It also fuels tension through land confiscation, movement restrictions, and settler violence. Every new settlement unit changes facts on the ground, narrowing the space for a negotiated two-state solution. Jerusalem is one of the most sensitive unresolved questions. Palestinians claim East Jerusalem as the capital of their future state, while Israel considers Jerusalem its capital, including the eastern part captured in 1967. The international community largely does not recognize Israeli sovereignty over East Jerusalem and generally views its final status as something to be determined through negotiations. The city's importance is not only political. It contains sites sacred to Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, including the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and the Western Wall. Control over access, policing, residency rights, housing, and holy places can quickly become a flashpoint. Palestinian residents of East Jerusalem often face a complex legal status. They are not citizens of a Palestinian state with sovereignty over the city, and many hold Israeli permanent residency rather than citizenship. This makes Jerusalem both a symbol of national aspiration and a daily arena of legal, religious, and demographic struggle. Another unresolved issue is the right of return for Palestinian refugees. Millions of Palestinians today are registered as refugees or descendants of refugees from the 1948 war and later displacement. They live in the West Bank, Gaza, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and across the wider diaspora. Palestinians argue that refugees have a right to return to their homes and lands, based on principles of international law and UN resolutions. Israel rejects a broad return, arguing that it would end Israel's Jewish majority and undermine the state's identity. This issue is deeply personal because it concerns family homes, villages, property, memory, and identity passed down through generations. Refugee camps that were once temporary have become long-term urban communities. Any final peace agreement would need to address return, compensation, resettlement, recognition of suffering, and political rights. Without a solution for refugees, the conflict remains not just a territorial dispute, but an unresolved story of displacement. Internationally, Palestine occupies an unusual position. It is recognized as a sovereign state by 157 of the 193 United Nations member states and holds the status of a permanent non-member observer state at the UN. It is also a member of organizations such as the Arab League, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and UNESCO. This recognition gives Palestine diplomatic visibility, but it does not equal full control on the ground. Its borders, capital, airspace, water access, security, and movement remain constrained by occupation, blockade, internal division, and dependence on international aid. Supporters of Palestinian statehood argue that recognition affirms the Palestinian right to self-determination. Critics argue that statehood must come through negotiated agreement with Israel. This gap between diplomatic recognition and practical sovereignty is one of the defining contradictions of Palestine today. It is treated as a state in many international forums, while Palestinians still live without the freedoms usually associated with statehood. Since the Hamas-led attacks in Israel on October 7, 2023, the war in Gaza has pushed the Palestinian question into an even more catastrophic phase. Israel launched a large-scale military campaign in Gaza, saying its goal was to destroy Hamas and recover hostages. The campaign has killed tens of thousands of Palestinians, displaced most of Gaza's population, devastated civilian infrastructure, and created famine conditions and a severe humanitarian crisis. Israeli officials say Hamas embeds itself among civilians, while humanitarian organizations argue that civilians have borne an unacceptable and disproportionate cost. A growing number of scholars, human rights experts, and institutions have described Israel's actions in Gaza as genocide, while Israel strongly rejects that accusation. The debate is now part of legal and diplomatic proceedings, but for civilians in Gaza, the immediate reality is destruction, hunger, grief, and uncertainty. This war has intensified global scrutiny of occupation, blockade, armed resistance, civilian protection, and the future of Palestine itself. Palestine's future remains unresolved because the central questions remain unresolved. Will there be an independent Palestinian state, and if so, where will its borders be? What happens to Israeli settlements? Who governs Gaza after war? Can Palestinian political division be repaired? What is the status of Jerusalem? What rights will refugees have? And can security for Israelis and freedom for Palestinians be achieved at the same time? Despite occupation, blockade, political fragmentation, and economic hardship, Palestinian society continues through education, culture, religion, business, tourism, family networks, and diaspora connections. Arabic is the official language, Islam is the majority religion, and Christianity remains an important part of Palestinian heritage. The story of Palestine is therefore not only a story of conflict. It is a story of a people seeking recognition, rights, and self-determination in a land shaped by empire, faith, nationalism, war, and diplomacy. Until the core issues are addressed, Palestine will remain central to the politics of the Middle East and the conscience of the world. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.